So Amanda, thank you so much for being on our show. Today we're going to talk about simply just stress and anxiety. Let's get right into it. How does stress and anxiety show up first and foremost in our body physically?
I think it's really important to discuss here the flight or fight response. Now, the flight or fight response is an automatic primitive response from the nervous system that prepares us for threat or danger. So when we witness a danger in our environment, our bodies go into fight or flight mode. So we either fight the response or flight the response, which means to escape or escape the situation. So let's just say, for example, you are in your bedroom, you're about to sleep, and a strange man opens up the window and has a knife on him. What do you think you would do, hypothetically?
Well, I mean, what I would do, that's really personal. I might scream. I might run out.
Yep. So there's no right or wrong answer here, and we don't think about the pros and cons of doing, fight or flight. We just do it. It's an automatic response. Okay. So I'll give you another example. If you are crossing the road and a truck is about to hit you, what do you think you would do?
Run.
Exactly. You're not going to fight the truck, it's going to squash you. So
Yeah.
you would flight the response. So let's just say hypothetically now you've did the flight response and you've survived by 1 inch. Now, what do you think is happening physiologically to your body as a result? What's happening to your heart rate?
Yeah, I would imagine I'd be hyperventilating. So short breathful, breathy, and fast heart rate. I might be sweating a little bit even. I don't sweat a lot, but I might sweat.
Yes, that's right. So your heart would be palpitating, you would have shortness of breath, chest tightness, your hands will start to shake, your underarms and your palms will start to sweat, your mouth will become dry, our eyes will dilate as well. Now, have you noticed these things are what you feel when you get anxious or stressed out generally?
Um, yeah, like not to that extent and not that obvious, but certainly, I mean, I can have like shortness of breath and I can feel my heart rate, increasing if I'm nervous or if I consistently put myself outside the comfort zone, which I do. I tend to do a lot. But yeah, I do. I mean, that can definitely happen day to day. Yeah,
And do you know why this happens to you?
because I'm nervous. I don't know.
Exactly. So your fight or flight response is being activated because it's detecting a danger in your environment. So, whether the danger is a truck is about to hit me, or the danger is I'm not going to finish this report on time, I'm going to be late for work, my manager will be angry at me, will this pain ever go away? All of these things are triggers in your life. Which cause your fight or fight response to activate and causing all of these physiological symptoms to occur.
Wow. And so what sort of therapies do you use or do you suggest to overcome this general sort of stress and anxiety? So we're talking now day to day, not those extreme sort of examples, but just day to day when we have this anxiety we overcome by nervousness. What are some techniques that you recommend?
So, depending on the diagnoses that are presented, I do certain types of therapy. So, one of my main therapies that I provide is something called the cognitive behavioural therapy. Now, it sounds very fancy. What it basically is, it's helping challenge your cognition, so your thought process, and your behavior. So, when I'm talking about behavior, I'm talking also about motivation levels, uh, things that you're not interested in doing that you used to enjoy doing, your attention and concentration levels, your energy levels, and things like that. So within the CBT, I do some relaxation exercises as well to help you learn how to deal with stress more productively. So I find that that's the foundation of all therapy.
So can you give an example of like how do you one of the relaxation techniques?
There's a few that I teach to my patients. I do the deep breathing. I teach them progressive muscle relaxation, where they tense their body parts from toe to head, one body part at a time, to help release tension in the body. And I also teach mindfulness. Now, one of the most common ones that people have heard of is deep breathing, where you breathe in through your nose, hold for 3 seconds, and breathe out through your mouth. So this expands the lungs, more oxygen comes through and relaxes the nervous system. So the flight or fight response we were just talking about previously.
A lot of our guest speakers talk about, long, deep breaths. And I think this is one of the ones that is just so useful, because it's one thing that you don't need, you don't need to change your environment. You could literally be anywhere, and all you need to do is just pause and take some really deep breaths. And whatever, I mean, if you're in an office and you've got 6 people next to you, they might look at you and go, oh, what are you doing? But outside of that, I think it's one of those things that we can do anytime we start to feel tense and tension in our body. And yeah, I'm actually a big fan of it. I do it quite a bit myself. It's just deep breaths, and it's almost like this stress, like it's a release of stress and even thoughts, because sometimes we carry a lot of baggage from our thinking, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think it is really important to do these relaxation exercises. And I always tell people they're portable. You can do them anywhere and everywhere you like, and no one will even know that you're doing it. You could be sitting at your desk. You can go to the bathroom if you need to, and just do the deep breathing and just tensing and relaxing your muscles, even doing mindfulness. Now, I teach a very good strategy if someone, for example, is on public transport, let's just say a bus, and I will get them to do mindfulness. So what mindfulness is noticing things you don't normally notice in your environment, using your 5 senses. So your hearing, your sight, taste, touch, and smell. So if you were on a bus, for example, I would get them to do 5 things they can see, 4 things they can hear, 3 things they can touch, 2 things they can smell, 1 thing they can taste. And it gets them to feel distracted and just focus on the present moment rather than focusing on any triggers or stress that they're experiencing.
And bringing them back to the present moment.
Exactly. And that is the main objective for mindfulness.
Yeah. These are some really great tools. What about in terms of thinking? So our thoughts, do you have like a framework or any quick strategies that someone can do on their own if they if they sense themselves sort of going into a loop, say extreme thinking or just negative, like a negative loop of thought?
100%. So this is where I like to teach my patients something called the ABC model of thinking. Now, this is a framework that helps challenge irrational thinking to rational thinking. So if we were to experience an event together, the way you perceive the event might not be the way I perceive the event. Okay, so this is where the ABC thinking comes in. I'm going to give you an example here. So if let's just say there are 3 men at a bus stop and they've been waiting for the bus. It's been half an hour, they see the bus arriving, they stand up, only for the bus to just drive right past them. Now, the first man is extremely angry, the second man is extremely happy, and the third man is indifferent, doesn't really care. Now, what do you think the reason is for all of these 3 different types of thinking?
Uh, well, it could also be just what they're like. Maybe the first man who's angry feels rejected, or it reminds him of a time that he got rejected, or he's going to now be late for something. So they,
Exactly.
yeah, could be
That's
some
right.
reason behind it.
Yeah, he could be even, have an important meeting and scared that his manager might fire him or lose an important project. So this is why he's extremely angry. Now, why do you think the second man is extremely happy?
Because it wasn't his bus.
Could be, okay. It also could be he didn't even want to go to the meeting at work, so he was glad that he missed it and had a reason to do so. What about the third man? He's indifferent. Why do you think he's indifferent?
Because he might have 10 other things that are much more important than missing a bus. So he's just not going to respond to it. Or maybe he has no emotional reserves. So he doesn't have the emotional response to it.
Exactly. That was a good response. He could also be unemployed and doesn't have anywhere to go, so he's just happy to waste time. See, these three different men experiencing the same event, but all had different reactions, all because of your thought process. Now, I always tell everybody, your thought process, or you are the product of your own happiness and you are the product of your own misery, all based on your thought process. So the ABC model of thinking, A starts with activating event, B is beliefs, and C is consequence. Now, a lot of people believe that an activating event causes the consequence. I missed the bus, therefore I'm angry. And that's actually wrong. It's actually the belief that causes the consequence. Okay, so A leads to B, leads to C. So if we were to do this framework and we would discuss the irrational way of thinking first, I'm going to give you an example to give you an idea. Let's just say Mary and Jane, they're friends. Mary is having a coffee at a cafe. Jane walks past, looks in her direction, and continues to walk. That's it. Now, if we were to apply it in the ABC framework, what would be the activating event here? What would be the activating event in facts? No assumptions here.
Tell me, what would it be?
Okay, so it would be just that story. So Jane was having a coffee, Mary walks past, looks in her direction, and continues to walk.
Okay.
Now, if you were thinking irrationally here, what do you think could be the beliefs that pass in Jane's mind?
She doesn't like me.
Exactly. She doesn't like me, she's ignoring me, she's not really a friend, causing a consequence. Now, what do you think the consequence would be if Jane was thinking this way?
She would ignore her the next time that they were to bump into each other.
Exactly. She would probably be upset, angry. I don't want to ever talk to her again. She's not a true friend. Okay. Now, if we were to challenge it on the other hand and think of it in a rational way, A, B, C. So we would start with A, what is the activating event? And that would be the same scenario. Jane sitting having a coffee, Mary walks past, looks in her direction, and continues to walk. What would be the beliefs if we were thinking rationally here?
There could be a few, like maybe that day she forgot to wear her glasses and contacts and so really didn't recognize, her. That can
Exactly.
happen. It's happened to me. Like it's happened to me many times where I haven't worn my glasses and then I've just kind of dismissed someone because I don't have great vision, right?
Exactly.
It could
Exactly.
also be that she might be in her thoughts. Like we are so caught up in our thoughts sometimes that we don't notice, right? She could be really caught up in her own thinking in that moment.
Exactly. And because of those thought processes, what do you think the consequence would be? So imagine yourself in this cafe and your good friend walks past and you think, she probably just didn't see me. She's up in her own thoughts. What would you do?
Well, I'd walk up and say hello.
Okay. So now let's have a look at this. Let's review this. So with the activating event, they were both the same. But because you had completely different beliefs, it completely changed the consequence. You can either defriend this girl and never want to talk to her ever again, or you could be potentially having a coffee with her at the cafe. Okay. This is where we need to challenge our thought processes because, as I said before, you are the product of your own happiness or misery. The way that you think leads to your emotions, leads to your reactions.
It's a powerful example, I think, of our beliefs. It certainly is. But how do you, when you're not used to this, right? When you're not used to challenging your thoughts, how do you bring that into a kind of part of your habits that you start to stop and challenge how you're thinking? Where do you start?
That's a really good question. I've been doing this for so many years of my life, right? Challenge my thinking, so it becomes like second nature to me. But for someone, I would highly suggest that they practice this over and over. There are going to be circumstances in our life where we do think negatively, and most of the time, humans do think negatively first, or irrationally. So this is why it's important to recognize when you're thinking irrationally, when you've got those negative automatic thoughts, and challenge them. So they'll probably be able to challenge them after the fact rather than whilst it's happening. And that's okay. At first, you will start to practice over and over until it becomes second nature to you.
Yeah, and I think this is where the other initiative of journaling or writing things down is really useful as well, because to really bring something into our awareness that we're not used to, or introduce a new habit, just writing it down, bringing it into the intention at the beginning of the day that today I'm going to notice if I'm being triggered, or notice if I have a negative thought coming up, or I fall into like a default pattern of thinking.
I agree.
You
I
know, one of the
agree.
things, Amanda, when I started on this whole journey of improving my mental health, and then started practicing some of these strategies that we talk about, challenging our thinking, etc., it brings up a lot of things for people. Like, it brings up a lot of things. It also actually brings up shame and judgment for yourself, because there are times where, you know, you're really self-critical, and then when you challenge the part of you that's being self-critical, it brings up memories or events in your life that have created those associations, and then a lot of other things come up in that journey. It's not straightforward, right? It's like a
Yes.
really fascinating journey of unraveling and understanding your psychology. So in that, then, what are the self-care tools and strategies that you recommend to people when they're going through this evolution and understanding of themselves? How do they look after themselves? Because parts of mental health and psychology is really going into deeper levels of yourself, basically. And that can bring up a lot of emotions. So how do you what are some good self-care tools that people can do without completely restructuring their day?
So I would reinforce what you've just mentioned here with journaling. I think it's a very cathartic way of releasing very strong pent-up emotions. So just giving it a physicality and burning it if you wanted to, shredding it, delete it, as long as you're getting rid of it. I wouldn't recommend to reread over it, just writing it and get it out of the way. Other self-care strategies that I would recommend is take a bath, do some reading, go do hobbies or leisure activities that you enjoy, paint by numbers, gardening. Um, One of the main things that I recommend to my patients is exercise. So, exercise is really good because it releases endorphins, which is a feel good hormone. So, naturally, when we start to exercise, we start to feel good. Our mood improves. Dopamine levels are increased, serotonin levels are increased. And these are all the mood stabilizers. So, there's research that shows that 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise for 2 months straight is actually equivalent to taking an antidepressant medication. So that goes to show how effective exercise can be.
Wow, that's really powerful. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that. So, and that's it. Like, a lot of these tools are available to everyone, right? We're not, you don't have to be like ultra wealthy. You don't have to have all of the time in the world. You just have to fit it into your schedule.
Also, just being outside as well just helps. Just being outside under the sun for 15 minutes a day. The sun releases melatonin in our bodies, and melatonin is a sleep hormone. So it produces in our body and allows us to sleep better at night. So if you're doing some self care, just go outside for 15 minutes a day. Sometimes I find patients have difficulty doing little things in their life, their lack of motivation, they're tired, low energy. So just sitting outside for 15 minutes a day out in the sun, not only will you get some vitamin D, you will also get the melatonin, the serotonin, the dopamine levels that I was discussing before.
Thank you, Amanda. These are really good strategies. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of the Leora podcast. We hope that the episode has brought you valuable insight, strategies, and inspiration to enhance your life. Thank you again for being part of the Workplace Wellbeing Fam. And until next time, take care and keep thriving.